junior. I've been in the Academy for 3 years, since I was a freshman. Over the course of this year, starting I would say midway through January, I've written a thesis in Humanities, and that is a 30-page paper on any topic basically that we were interested in, that we thought we could write 30 pages about, and that's a very daunting question to ask, at least in my opinion. I thought, what am I interested enough to write 30 pages about? And not a lot of things, easily came to mind, so I had to really sit down and think. And I decided to focus more on my two very broad interests in law and film. And in law, I have a specific interest in sex-related crimes. And in film, I'm just interested in the field as a whole. So I thought that this topic, Hollywood's transformation, the casting couch, and #MeToo, perfectly summarized those two, brought together those two topics into something that I was very fascinated and could write 30 pages about. And so my interest in this topic began last year in my sophomore humanities class. We had to do a passion project, similar to the one that we're going to do senior year, sort of a miniature version. We had a couple months to complete, and I chose, not quite film, but I did a photo series. So as you can see, this is it wasn't online, it was like physical frames that I made, incorporating art, which I'm not very good at, but I decided to incorporate art because I wanted to do something outside my comfort zone, so I actually made these frames. And in the frames are pictures of 5 of my closest friends, ranging in ages of 12 to 16. So after I took these portraits, which was hard to do because I've never taken a photography class, I just had to wing it, figure out how to do it myself. I interviewed them about their experiences with sexual harassment. And the thing that kept coming up over and over again was catcalling. And I've realized that every single one of these girls had a story, an experience about catcalling. I thought this was really interesting. So I basically changed the entire course of my project to focus not just on sexual harassment as a whole, but catcalling in general. So I interviewed all of them. I picked one story that I found the most interesting, and I wrote at the bottom of the frame what sentence really stuck out to me from their stories, what I found the most disturbing, especially juxtaposed with their ages, as you can see on the top, and their faces. So this was a photo series that I created. It was displayed in the Morristown Library, and this is what stemmed my interest that's continued this year. So I had 4 main steps in completing my paper, and the first was figuring out what I wanted to do. Obviously, I already explained that process, but then I had to collect data, and I had to collect sources. So this is a very, very small fraction of the 20-page long data table that I created on my research topic, sources, and then quotes. So I read so many articles about everything. Early Hollywood, the Me Too movement, the casting couch, definitions of sexual assault, specific cases, everything that fell under that very broad umbrella that I had chosen myself. I spent a month just researching and picking out quotes, and this ended up being the backbone of my paper because I decided exactly what I wanted to focus on. It's all on this data table. So the next thing I did was create my thesis. This is my thesis that my entire paper focused on. So Hollywood's transformation from the acceptance of the practice of the casting couch to the Me Too social movement is reflective of society's changing perspectives of sex-related crime and its victims. That's my thesis. I wrote my entire 30 pages on. Okay. The next thing I did, and I believe that this is the most important step, I made an outline. Again, this is a miniature portion of the entire outline that I created. As you can see, it's very, very detailed. It took me maybe 1 class period to make this outline, and this is what I relied on for the entire 5 months of actually writing my paper. I really believe that if I didn't have this outline, I would have been completely lost, would have had no direction. And this was a great way of making sure that everything that I wanted to talk about, that I felt like was the most important to talk about, would be included. So, outline. Then I actually began writing. So this is the first couple sentences of my paper. 30 more pages of this. So I was very fortunate that my writing actually began to flow really easily. I think because I chose a topic that I was so interested in. Once I started to write, not only did I not want to stop, I didn't have to because ideas just kept flowing. And I was very lucky in this that I was actually able to pick, and this was my first idea, first topic, and I just stuck with it the entire time, and I'm very lucky in that regard. And like I said, I relied very heavily on my outline. I never had to, there were some days, as I'm going to talk about next, that I had no idea where to go, even with the outline. But overall, not extremely difficult to begin writing. So, like I've been saying, I felt like I had an easier process than most, but that doesn't mean that it was completely easy. Writing a thesis is not an easy task. It's actually very daunting, and it almost kept me from taking humanities this year. But I'm so glad that I did, because now I actually have this finished product that I can look at and that I can call my own. But there were setbacks that I faced, many, throughout the 5 months that I wrote the paper. So the first one is writer's block. Sometimes I had no idea what to write. I looked at my outline and I looked back at the blank screen, and then I sat there for a half an hour, just thinking, trying to process what I wanted to do, because I knew what I had on my outline. I knew what direction technically I should go in, but it didn't seem right. And what I learned from this is that it's okay sometimes to take the day off, to take a break, to look back, to look over what you have, look over it 10 times, and make sure that that's actually what you like and continue editing. Because when you get to the end of your paper, you'll find that everything you've written so far is actually stuff that you've already edited. Because of those days that I just felt like I couldn't continue. That quality is over quantity. And even if I had 10 pages, if it was something that I actually liked, I would call that an accomplishment for the day. Staying on topic, like I mentioned, this topic was something that I was very, very interested in, and I would do hours of research, and I would say, all right, I want to incorporate this, I want to incorporate this, I want to incorporate this, and I wasn't aware of the fact that it wasn't maybe entirely relevant to what I wanted to write about. I didn't want my paper to be all over the place. I needed it to follow one specific track. So sometimes I would start writing about something, and then I would just have to complete a whole page. And that was a whole day's work gone because I wasn't staying on topic, and I wasn't, relying my message that I wanted to. Okay, so about halfway through my paper, I remember I had a little moment where I started to ask myself, who cares? I know I care a lot about this topic. This is something that has disturbed me for a long time, something that I've been curious about for a long time. But who says that someone that has no interest in law, no interest in film, is going to care about this at all? And they might not, and I wouldn't blame them. So I had to make it that anyone that picked up my paper, whether they had an interest in my topic, whether they're similar to me or not, would want to read it and would want to continue. And that was something that I still struggle with. I still don't know if I managed to do that in my paper. I really hope that I did. But the way that I managed to complete this is I started to not just focus, Hollywood, it seems very far away from us. Celebrity culture, it's not something that we're maybe as directly connected to. So I tried to bring it back into our lives. I talked more towards the end of my paper about how it actually affects each and every one of you, and me, and people that I know. And it doesn't just affect people that we read about in tabloids. It affects each and every one of us every day. And that Hollywood is just a microcosm of the rest of the world. So that's just how I managed to hopefully write with an actual purpose of education